Hello everyone, welcome to free crash course for competitive exams held by Virat Hindustan Sangam in association with Manifest IAS Bengaluru. This program is inspired by Dr. Swamy and it is convened by Ravi Shankar sir, State Education Convener for VHS Karnataka and also President of Good Neighbors India NGO. This program is telecasted online on the YouTube channel of Virat Hindustan Sangam. Also you can watch it on the YouTube channel of Udaya News Karnataka. Okay, so you for any further queries, I've activated the group again, VHS Education Forum. You can join here and you can take the free mentoring for any exams. Or you can ask all your doubts. This is a Telegram channel. Okay. So I'm the chief mentor of your program, Dhanush Kumar. I've been mentoring civil service aspirants or competitive exam aspirants for past 5 years. So we are dealing with polity and history. Economy will be gotten over within 1 or 2 days, today and tomorrow maximum. And we will next take up geography, environment, and the list goes on. Right? So let us begin the class. So yesterday I was discussing about International Monetary Fund. So this is a Bretton Woods institution formed by Bretton Woods Consensus 1945 in the state of New Hampshire, United States. Two institutions, one is IMF, next is World Bank. So International Monetary Fund. So I told you under this, under the IMF, there is a governing council, there is an executive body, and also you have this IMFC and one more development body is there, development committee. These two are ministerial committees. They advise the executive body and the governing body, right? So I have discussed till the development committee. Now what are the functions of IMF? What functions does it do? One, the main function is if any country is having balance of payment crisis. What do you mean by balance of payment crisis? I have discussed in detail in the chapter on balance of payment. That is, if your foreign currency inflow is less and outflow is more, and this is one condition. Next, you are dependent on imports, essential imports, right? Essential imports, that is petroleum and all those things, right? Food, that might be food also, right? So then if you don't have money to purchase these essential imports, then it is said as the balance of payment crisis broadly, but I have discussed in detail what is balance of payment. So any country is facing a balance of payment crisis, then the IMF will come to its aid. IMF will give money to the countries, right? That is the first function. Then it conducts surveillance. Surveillance means it watches the economy of individual countries as well as the world economy together. If there is any crisis in the world economy or individual economy, the IMF is going to give them precautions or warnings that your economy is going to fall, or there will be some trade war, or there will be some crisis, just like COVID crisis or 2008 financial crisis. So the IMF is going to predict it and give warnings, crisis prevention. Then it is also working towards exchange rate stability, exchange rate policies. So if the country's exchange rate suddenly falls or suddenly appreciates, it will be problematic. So IMF gives policy prescription to maintain the exchange rate stability. It is also one of the function. Next, it also gives technical training. So who is the head of IMF now? IMF head Christiana Georgieva. Christiana Georgieva is the head of IMF. Who is the chief economist? Geeta Gopinath is the chief economist, right? So they provide technical training. If India or any country, poor country or any country wants assistance with respect to framing their own economic policy, financial policy or monetary policy related to money, if they don't have sufficient expertise, they will seek technical assistance from International Monetary Fund. that is one function. Then it also fights money laundering and terrorism financing. Money laundering is you will try to hide your money in some, you won't pay the tax for the ill-gotten money. Ill-gotten money, suppose you are trading in arms, drugs or these things, right? And you will get money for which you will not pay tax. You will try to store it somewhere else. That is money laundering. So IMF tries to fight the money laundering as well as terrorism. That is one of the function of IMF. Also, it also benefits to the, has lot of benefits to the countries. It gives policy prescriptions, technical assistance. If the countries need money, everything will be, there is lot of benefits because of IMF for the countries. If there is balance of payment crisis, right? Likewise, there are many benefits of the IMF for the countries. This is the functions of IMF. Next, you have the concept of IMF quota. So quota means, so what is the money that a country has to subscribe to? So quota consists of three things. One is SDR, next is foreign currency and local currency, right? This quota is assigned when you join when a new country joins the IMF, quota is assigned, right? So on what basis does the quota is assigned for an individual country? It is based on the relative size of the economy. If a country is having a big economy, more quota will be given to that country. If a country is having a small economy, less quota, right? That is one thing. Also, it guides the subscriptions. Quota will guide the subscription. How much money you are going to subscribe to. So, if a country wants to join to IMF, new country, they have to subscribe to some capital. Subscribe. That is, they have to give some capital and subscribe some shares in the IMF. So, this quota is going to guide that subscription. How much money you are going to give to IMF, right? And also it decides the voting power. How much vote do you have in the decision making of the IMF, right? So this IMF is owned by member countries. It is not owned by any particular country, but by member countries together. So when they have to make some decision, it is dependent on the voting power of individual countries, which is based on the IMF quota. Then you have financing. Financing power is also taken by that is, if a country wants to take money from IMF, right? So then that financing will also be determined by the quota. How much money, suppose 1991 crisis, India had balance of payment crisis, right? Then how much money did India borrow? It depended on the IMF quota India had, right? This is the concept. Next, this IMF quota, it is denominated in SDR, special drawing rights, right? It is the artificial currency of the IMF, right? So it is the IMF's unit of account. Means what valuation? What is the value of IMF? What is the currency which is going to measure the IMF value? It is measured in the special drawing rights. So IMF currency is SDR. So 25% foreign. How does the IMF quota will be filled? 25% foreign currency should be given in the IMF quota. Next, 75%. I told you, no? 75% is the local currency. If India subscribes, India has to give rupees 75%. Next, you have reserve tranche position. What do you mean by reserve tranche position? This 25% foreign currency which is being given to the IMF as a quota, that is called reserve tranche position. Reserve tranche position is related to foreign currency. How much money you are giving to IMF during your subscription in the foreign currency, that is called reserve tranche position, right? So quota depends on what factors? It depends on your GDP. It depends on your GDP, right? And it depends on how open an economy you are. Whether you are more open economy or less open, that thing will be determining your quota. And also how variable your economy is. Means whether your economy is in recession, whether your economy is in boom, whether how is it going to vary. Is the variation between boom and recession fast, or quick variation is there, or slow variation is there, right? So that economic variability also determines the quota. Next, the fourth factor is international reserves. How much foreign exchange reserves you have. That will also determine the quota subscriptions. So quota subscription is dependent on fourth factors: GDP, openness, economic variability, and international reserves a individual country has. Right? This is about quota. So India's quota, earlier it was 2.44%. Earlier 2.44% was the India's quota. Now it has been increased to 2.76%. So this quota will be reassigned every 5 to 10 years, right? Every 5 years there will be a meeting where in that meeting they are going to reassign the quota for individual countries, right? So quota reforms has been asked. So Board of Governors is the quota, they will decide if the quota has to be increased. So in the IMF, what happened? Chinese currency was also taken. So Chinese currency, when they take it as the one of the currency which measures the SDR. So SDR earlier was measured on what currencies? USA dollar, pound, Japanese yen, and UK pound, euro. These currencies it was dependent on. Now it is also dependent on Chinese renminbi or yuan, Chinese yuan. So whether there should be any change in the quota, whether I told you India increased from 2.44 to 2.76% quota. Who decides it? It is decided by the Board of Governors of the International Monetary Fund. So in order to undertake quota reforms, there should be 85% majority. 85% of the countries vote should fall in favor of quota reforms, then only there will be quota reforms, or else there will be no quota reforms, right? The highest quota today is maintained by United States of America in the IMF, highest quota. Next, special drawing rights. What is it all about? Special drawing rights means it is the IMF's artificial currency. It is not a physical currency, rather a artificial currency, right? It is a international reserve asset. International artificial currency. So you know what is artificial currency, right? So it is also a international reserve asset. Means the countries can hold SDRs as a reserve, foreign reserve, right? India also holds certain amount of SDRs as part of its foreign reserve. That is the foreign reserve currency. That is international reserve asset. Every country will hold SDR as a reserve asset. So this concept of SDR came in 1969. Until then there was no concept of SDR, special drawing rights, right? So it supplements the individual currency, foreign currencies. It supplements the dollar. It supplements the dollar. It supplements the euro, right? It supplements these currencies. So it supplements the individual foreign currencies, right? So the value is based on 5 currencies. I told you what are the currencies, right? So it is based on what currencies? Dollar, pound, yen of Japan, euro, and now yuan or renminbi. These are the 5 currencies. It is reviewed every 5 years. So should we add any? See, last time Chinese yuan was added, right? So every 5 years there will be revision, whether there should be any new currency that should be added. So every 5 years there will be revision that takes place in the Board of Governors, right? Next you have what are the criterion in order to be a qualify to be a in order to qualify to be a part of SDR. So I told you SDR has value depends on 5 currencies. So even if a rupee wants to be a qualifying criteria for SDR. If SDR value should depend on rupee, what should be the qualifying criteria for rupee? So one, our export potential should be high. If our export potential is high, then rupee can be qualifying to part of SDR. Then our rupee should be a freely usable currency. Freely usable, that is, there should be no restrictions. It should be convertible completely, or to the maximum extent there should be convertibility. So it should be used freely in the international economy, right? Then its value should not vary. That is, it should not depreciate in a fast way. It should not appreciate in a fast way. There should be stability in the value, right? That is also determines whether a country's currency qualifies to be a part of SDR. What is the use of SDR? Right? See, earlier the global currency, even today it is dollar, right? There is a need to shift from a nation's currency to a international currency. So SDR can act as a international currency. That is the first use. Second use is SDR's value depends on multiple currencies, right? So that its value is not dependent on individual currency. So there is stability in the SDR value that is there. Apart from that, what is the use of SDRs? One more thing is SDRs can be held by individual countries. Individual countries. So if you have individual people cannot hold SDR, countries can hold SDRs. If you have SDRs, you can ask to any country that you give your currency, I will give you SDR. You can convert it into nation's currency. That is one thing, that is one use. But this is not a claim on IMF. You cannot, just by holding SDR, you cannot claim that you are the owner of IMF, right? So it doesn't qualify to be any claim on the IMF, but it can be used as a currency to be converted into any foreign currency, right? So that is the use of SDR. So there are multiple uses. Its value is stable. All these are the uses of SDR. So there is a need for SDR to be a global reserve currency. See, today the global reserve currency is what? Dollar, right? Everybody prefers to hold dollar. So instead of dollar, we can have what? We can have SDR as a global reserve currency. Why? Because there are a lot of drawbacks with dollar. What are the drawbacks? First drawback is it is a national currency. It is confined to one country, right? One country's national currency cannot be a global currency. Next, if the value of dollar drops, it will be a disaster for the entire world, right? That is the second drawback. Third drawback is USA. If the USA faces any problem, they have the option of printing how much ever dollars they want, right? There will be concept of economic inequality. So all these are the drawbacks of dollar. So there will be no democratization, no equality among the countries, right? Because of having dollar as a reserve currency, right? So the better option is shift the reserve currency to SDR, right? So this was also prescribed by John Maynard Keynes. So John Maynard Keynes says that he gives a concept of banker, B-A-N-C-O-R. He calls this currency, banker should be the B-A-N-C-O-R, should be the global reserve currency. He gives this concept, but this concept of banker doesn't get implemented, right? So this is about the global reserve currency. So what are the financial resources of IMF? Where is the finances of the IMF come from? One is the quota reserves, right? So IMF resources, where does the money of the IMF go or come from? One is it comes from the quota. Individual country give their subscription in the quotas. That is the first way the IMF gets the money. The next way is borrowing arrangement. There are two borrowing arrangements. We will discuss that. New arrangement to borrow and one more thing, NAB and SBA, I think. So there are two arrangements to borrow. Even there, from there, if you borrow, you have to pay interest, right? So that there also IMF gets the money from. Next you have from bilateral agreements. From the bilateral agreements with the countries, IMF is either going to give money or take money from those countries. So these three things constitutes the resources of the IMF. Only in these three ways the IMF can raise the money or reserves. There is no other way, right? So why should IMF have the reserves? Because being a institution aiming to maintain the economic stability. So economic stability is maintained only when you have resources, or else you cannot maintain it. So raising of resources is very, very important for any institution, right? Next, we will talk about the borrowing arrangements. What are the borrowing arrangements? So you have two things. One is new arrangement to borrow and general agreement to borrow. General arrangement to borrow. GAB and NAB. General arrangement to borrow and new arrangement to borrow, right? So why is this? So who borrows under this? Countries can borrow under this NAB and GAB. General arrangement to borrow or global arrangement to borrow and new arrangement to borrow. These are the two things of borrowing. So these supplement the quota. See, IMF cannot just depend on the quota subscriptions. It has to have other resources. So one of the resources is GAB and NAB, right? So India provides, see, today India provides $12 billion to the borrowing arrangements. Earlier, 1991, India was a borrower. Now, India is giving credit. Why? Where this credit goes under GAB and NAB, it goes to finance the sovereign debt crisis. Sovereign debt crisis in the European countries. Right? We will discuss what is sovereign debt crisis. So, India provides today to the World Bank borrowing arrangement $12 billion. So, IMF loan windows. There are multiple windows of taking loan from the IMF, right? So, what is the purposes of the IMF loan window? One is in order to thwart your balance of payment crisis. If a country is facing balance of payment crisis, you can borrow from IMF to stop the crisis. That is one thing. Then, in order to maintain exchange rate stability, right? If your rupee is going up or down too much, so in order to maintain proper value of rupee, there you can borrow the money, right? That is one purpose. Also, in order to, if your forex reserve has fallen too much, there also you can borrow from IMF, right? These are the many purposes of borrowing from IMF. Or you are not able to fund the essentials like education and health, then also you can borrow. But these are the IMF has multiple loan windows. Taking money from IMF has many windows. So these are the purposes. Then the IMF doesn't fund to specific project. See, World Bank funds to specific projects, education project, health project, right? Or infrastructure project or technology project. IMF, World Bank will fund. Whereas IMF doesn't fund to specific projects. It funds only to the governments. They will give money only to the governments, right? So, you have one loan window is poverty reduction and growth facility. This is the first loan window, right? So, this is low income countries. This money goes to the low income countries. Poverty reduction and growth facility. It focuses on alleviating the poverty in the low income countries. That is the first loan window. Then you have rapid credit facility. If there is some rapid crisis, sudden crisis, emergency like tsunami, COVID, suddenly a country needs money. Under rapid credit facility, the money comes. So, during COVID crisis, it could be utilized, right? So these rapid credit facility, it is tailored to the need of low income countries. What do you mean by tailored to the need of low income countries? See, these low income countries, they do not have capacity to pay high interest, right? High interest they cannot pay. So these under rapid credit facility, rapid loan facility, what happens? They will give money at very less interest rate, and they give money for a long term and less interest rate under the rapid credit facility. So it is called as it is tailored to the need of low income countries. Next you have flexible credit line. Concept of flexible means IMF is flexible, it is not stringent. If you are not able to pay the money this year, you can pay it next year. Also the interest rates are also flexible. So it is going to restructure the loan, right? Whatever the loan that has given it to you. So you have flexible credit line. So this can also be used to the under the pandemic crisis, right? So where does this flexible credit line money goes to? It goes for crisis prevention. If there is any crisis, disaster, there you can use it. This flexible credit line generally, see these two facilities, first two, PRGF, Poverty Reduction and Growth Facility, and Rapid Credit Facility, it is focused on low income countries. Whereas the flexible credit line goes to the strong economies. Under the window of flexible credit line, the money is given to the strong economies under crisis. Next you have exogenous shocks facility. So what is a shock? Let's say a country is reeling under sovereign debt crisis. It has taken too much debt and unable to repay it. Or a country is reeling under some shock like environmental disaster, less rainfall, less production. Under these conditions, these low income countries borrow from the exogenous shock facility, right? So this exogenous shock facility, under this IMF gives money, but not only the money, they are going to also give policy support. They are going to prescribe the policy, how you should cushion the shock, how you should get out of the shock, right? So that policy prescription is also given by the IMF, and also under exogenous shock facility, they give concessional finance. Means finance at low interest rate. See, only under Poverty Reduction and Growth Facility and exogenous shocks facility, you get concession finance at less interest rate. Not under any other facility, right? Okay. So next you have standby arrangement. Standby arrangement, this is very important because in 1991 when India faced the balance of payment crisis, India borrowed under this standby arrangement from the IMF, right? Under this standby arrangement. So when does they borrow? During the balance of payment crisis under standby arrangement, right? So these windows you should know, right? So this under this standby arrangement, it is non-concessional. They are not going to give money under any concession. Whatever the market prescribed interest rate is there, only under that interest they are going to give money, right? Okay. Next you have extended fund facility. So under this extended fund facility, they provide not only money, they provide money that is there, but just like your exogenous shock facility, they are going to also give policy change. What policies you have to change in your country in order to get out of the crisis? What are the negatives in your economy that you have to change? That they will prescribe and help you get out of the crisis, right? This is under extended fund facility. The money is extended, that is long term, 20 years, 30 years loan, right? So this is also useful for balance of payment crisis. So what is the amount of loan that they are going to give? So generally the amount of loan is given as per the demand of the countries or some percentage of the demand of the countries. So if there is a crisis, they are going to give it in, see this money they are going to give it in phases, right? So if the country, IMF commits $10 billion loan, they are not going to give entire 10 billion at once. How do they give it? So they will give some policy. Let's say you devalue your currency, devalue the rupee, right? So first they will give $1 billion. Then they will ask you to devalue your currency. Only when you devalue your currency, they will give the next 1 billion. Right? That it will be coming in phases based on policy changes. Right? Then what is the interest rate? Interest rate, it is, see, except for poverty reduction and growth facility and exogenous shock facility, rest of the loan windows, it is market based interest rate. There is no concession, right? So this is all about the IMF loan windows you have. Next you have World Economic Outlook, Global Financial Stability Report. So these are the two reports published by IMF. World Economic Outlook and Global Financial Stability Report. See this Global Financial Stability Report, it comes once in 2 years. It is a biannual report of the IMF. Right? These two reports you should know, very, very important. Next you have IMF and conditionalities. Conditionalities means what? They are going to give certain conditions. Only when you meet those conditions, IMF is going to give you money, or else IMF is not going to give you money. So that is the concept of IMF and conditionalities. So these conditionalities are called as Washington Consensus. Right? Washington Consensus. So who gave this name Washington Consensus? I think it is John Williamson. I will check it. The name Washington Consensus is given by whom? Yes, the name Washington Consensus is given by John Williamson, right? John Williamson. So, what are the conditionalities? Why should IMF impose any condition? See, the first reason is to correct the macroeconomy. I have already told you what is macroeconomy. If there are any deficiencies in the inflation policy, in the interest rate policy, right? Then the IMF is going to give certain macroeconomic policy prescriptions. Then, in order to correct the macroeconomy, they are going to impose certain conditions. So once you satisfy the conditions, then only they are going to give the money in installments, right? Fund in the policy change linked installments. So you do this change, you reduce the interest rate. We will give you this much money. You devalue your currency, we will give this much money. You liberalize your economy, we will give next tranche of money, right? Next tranche of money, right? Next you do what? You reduce the interest rate, then we will give you the next set of money, right? That is the funding will be linked to the policy change, right? That is the concept. So they also impose structural adjustments. What do you mean by structural adjustments? Structural adjustment means if the country is too much, there is government intervention in the country's economy, or if there is no private sector participation, right? If there are license Raj and inspector Raj, right? If the banking sector is not free, or if the currency is not free, so then they are going to impose, they are going to ask for structural adjustment. You do this structural change, we will give you money, right? So what are the other conditions they are going to impose? One is structural adjustment, next is austerity. What do you mean by austerity? So in the government spending you have to reduce. Government is spending on PDS, government is spending on vaccination, government is spending on Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, Ayushman Bharat. So those things you have to reduce. Social welfare measures you have to reduce. Spending, overall government spending should reduce. That is austerity. Next, devaluation is also a policy prescription given by IMF. Then you have to liberalize your economy. If the economy is not liberalized, if global companies are not allowed to participate, if private sector is not free to participate, then you have to liberalize it. Then you have to open up the economy for FDI, foreign direct investment. Then there should be budgetary reforms. Budgetary reforms, there will be lot of budget deficit. That is, government spends 100 rupees and gets back just 95 rupees. And this 5 rupees difference, what they do, they are going to print from RBI. That you have to change, right? Then there should be no price control. Prices in the market should be determined by the market. It should not be determined by the government, right? That is one concept. Next, there should be very less subsidy. There should be no petrol subsidy, LPG subsidy, kerosene subsidy, food subsidy. All these things you have to reduce, right? And also there should be private sector participation. Open your economy for privatization. Then rupee, the currency should be convertible, right? That is also a policy prescription or the conditionality that the IMF is going to give, right? So what are the reasons for imposing these conditionalities? See, why there is a reason behind IMF's mandate of imposing conditionalities. See, if there is a crisis in country, it will be because of some bad economic policy. That bad economic policy has to be changed. The country's economic structure has to get strengthened, right? In order to do that, only the IMF imposes in conditionality. So it is not because of some vexed interest, it is because of some scientific principle that if you follow these changes, your economy will become strong, your currency will become strong, your physical position will become strong, right? So that is the concept. So what is the criticism? Criticism of this conditionality. So it threatens the sovereignty, that is individual countries' freedom. Individual countries' freedom will be liberal, freedom would be threatened. So IMF will act as a dictator to those countries. That is one criticism. The next criticism is, IMF gives one size fits all approach. Means whatever the policy prescription it gives to India, it is going to give the same thing to Pakistan, to Somalia, to United States, everybody. Whereas this will not work because individual countries' problems will be different. So the policy prescriptions should be changing. It should not be similar for every problem. That is one thing. Then also they say that policy prescriptions are determined by the Western countries, vexed interest, right? So Western countries dictate what should be the policy change in the developing countries or least developed countries. That is also a criticism. So these are the criticism with respect to the IMF conditionalities. Then one more criticism is IMF, I told you, it works with the surveillance. It is going to maintain a surveillance of the economy, right? But 2008 Great Recession, IMF failed to predict. It could not do any good work during the before the Great Recession in order to stop it. That is also a failure of IMF. So 2008 Great Recession, what the IMF did, it carried out. 2008 recession means subprime lending crisis. So under this crisis, actually India did not get affected because India remained isolated. India did not get connected to the whole world at that time. So it remained isolated. Also our savings rate was very high. Savings rate. So in Western countries, the savings rate will be less. India savings rate is high. So that was also acted as a cushion for India to get over from the Great Recession 2008. So during that time, IMF carried out crisis lending. So there is a crisis, IMF is going to give money. That was carried out. Then it provided safety net so that countries do not fall into depression or they don't lose jobs, they don't go into sovereign debt crisis. So IMF provided a safety net around the countries so that they don't fall into depression, right? Also, IMF gave money to the European countries, PIGS countries, Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain. So they follow this, they have this sovereign debt crisis problem. What do you mean by sovereign debt crisis? Sovereign means individual country government. So these governments take money from the outside world and they fail to repay. They won't be able to repay that money. So when the government itself fails to repay the money, it is called as sovereign debt crisis. So during that time, IMF helped those countries, right? Then you have IMF works with various organizations around the world. It works with UNESCO, UNICEF, World Health Organization, various NGOs in order to provide social protection. Social protection in the sense income protection, health protection, education, everything, old age protection, pension, all those things. So to provide income security, IMF works with various organizations across the world. Next, you have IMF measure with respect to money laundering and terror financing. So IMF is going to monitor the countries. Which country there is high money laundering, which country there is huge financing of terrorism, right? So IMF is going to monitor the money laundering and terror financing, and it is going to fund the AML and CFT. AML means anti-money laundering initiatives or countering the terrorism finance. So IMF is going to fund these two initiatives. One is anti-money laundering and countering the terrorism of finance. It is going to give fund. Means what? If there is money laundering that is happening, illegal money, there should be measures against that, right? So those measures will be, the research taking those measures will be funded by IMF. Also countering the terrorism finance, right? That will also be, somebody is providing finance for terrorism. So in order to carry out research or stopping that, the support will be given by IMF, right? This is one thing. So IMF reforms, there is a lot of need for reforms in the IMF. The first and foremost reform is the MD. IMF managing director will always be from a European country, right? So it will not be from anyone outside Europe. So there should be democratization. IMF should not be confined to the Europe. It should be across the world. That is one policy prescription. Then IMF always gives the one size fits all recommendation. It is going to give one prescription. So for every disease, it gives the same medicine, right? It doesn't work, right? Every disease has different medicine. So for all the economic problems, IMF gives the same thing. That is also a criticism. So IMF has to reform in that direction. And also the conditions are said to be harsh. Austerity conditions or policy prescriptions, they are considered to be very harsh on the low income countries and also developing countries. There also IMF should change. And IMF do not carry out any reform, R&D. There is no research and development with respect to IMF working. That is also a drawback. Next, with respect to India, what should be the reform? Right? See, earlier India used to be what? A borrower. It borrowed in 1980s and also in 1990s. Right? So now India gives money to IMF. India gives money to IMF. Right? So, but there is no proper share of voting for India. So India should be given proper voting share, quota, according to its population strength or economic strength. Right? That is also a reform that should be carried out. Right? So India and IMF, what is the relationship? In 1981, we borrowed from the IMF under standby arrangement. 1981, it was under standby arrangement. I told you what it is. So it is a non-concessional finance under BOP crisis. Right? In 1991, India borrowed under Contingency Compensatory Financing Facility, CCFF. Contingency Compensatory Financing Facility, India is going to borrow in 1991. India is going to pledge its gold and take the money from the International Monetary Fund under CCFF facility. So India was bailed out. India had become literally bankrupt. We were on the verge of financial emergency. Right? At that time, India was bailed. So there was a threat of BOP crisis and also sovereign debt crisis. So India was bailed out at that time by International Monetary Fund. Right? That is there. So this is with respect to India's relationship with respect to IMF. Not only that, 1996 IMF carried out this special data dissemination standards. So whatever, see, every country maintains its account. How much money it is going to spend, how much money it is borrowing, what is the interest rate, which programs we are spending more, which countries we have given loan to. So there should be proper accounting, how much export, how much import. So there should be proper accounting according to a proper standard. That standard is given under the IMF Special Data Dissemination Standard. This standard was given in 1996. India follows this standard since 1996. India is a follower. Right? So now I told you earlier, IMF, the 1991 funded India. Now we are funding the IMF. That is the change in our country's economic strength. Right? It is a good change. Next. So there is a financial transaction plan with respect to India. Financial transaction plan with respect to IMF. What is this? FTP. Right? So 2002, India started participating in the financial transaction plan. Right? So what does it mean? It means, see, under quota, India is maintaining some money. Quota, India maintains some money with IMF. This money can be given for somebody, some nation which needs the money. That is encashing our quota or taking the quota from IMF and give it for lending. Lend it to some poor country who are in need. That is the financial transaction plan. Take the quota and give it to some country. That is the financial transaction plan. So now our quota is around 2.76% of the IMF total quota. Right? Next, so in this quota, India's quota is the 8th largest quota in the IMF. Right? So the number, this one, 2.75% is very, very important. So I already told IMF is working with respect to anti-money laundering and anti-terror financing, countering terror financing. So with respect to that, there is one more organization called FATF, Financial Action Task Force. Very important. So this is an intergovernment agency focusing on anti-money laundering and countering of financing of terrorism. Right? This has 37 members. Right? So this has 37 members. So headquarters is in Paris. Headquarters of FATF is in Paris. Right? So it has 37 members. So not only 37 members, it has some European countries as well as its members. So this is not European country, European Council, European Commission, EU Commission, European Commission is a member of FATF, and GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council, is also a member of FATF, right? So this headquarters is in Paris, and there is one more organization which focuses on AML and CFT. What is that organization? It is Asia Pacific Group. This group also focuses on anti-money laundering and countering the finance of terrorism. Two organizations in the world, FATF and Asia Pacific Group. Then you have, this is the concept of FATF. So one concept I have told. So there is one more concept called Chiang Mai Initiative. So this initiative was done by Asian countries plus China, Japan and South Korea. Why did they do? After 1997 crisis. I told you what is the crisis of 1997, Asian tigers. So then what happened? Due to that crisis, the sovereign ratings of the Asian countries degraded, right? Their currency were devalued, depreciated. So in order to protect that, this is a multilateral currency pooling arrangement. Means many countries come together and they are going to pool their currencies, multiple currencies, and keep them as a buffer. So when there is a crisis, this buffer could be utilized, right? So it is a currency pooling arrangement among the Asian plus three countries. The three countries are China, Japan and South Korea, right? It was formed post 1997 crisis. So whenever there is a short-term liquidity problem, liquidity means amount of money supply. If there is less money supply, right? If there is currency devaluing, then they can use this Chiang Mai Initiative currency pool. Next, you have similarly BRICS Contingency Reserve Arrangement. Contingency means emergency. Emergency Reserve Arrangement under the BRICS nation. So why do they use this? They use it under balance of payment crisis. See, earlier whenever there is a balance of payment crisis, we have to go and knock the door of IMF. Now we have so many other areas to tap into. So to tackle the balance of payment crisis, we have to go into the BRICS CRA, right? So this was signed in 2014 Fortaleza arrangement, where new development bank of the BRICS come into picture. So 2014, this BRICS CRA comes into picture. It provides safety net so that country doesn't fall into recession or depression, right? So this deals with liquidity pressure. When there is less liquidity in the economy, less money in the economy, when there is balance of payment crisis, then countries can go and ask this BRICS CRA and take the money, right? So it is $100 billion. China is the highest contribution. 41% is China's contribution to contingency reserve arrangement, whereas India's contribution is 18%. Russia is also 18%. Brazil is also 18%. The remaining is given by South Africa, right? $100 billion. This is a example of South-South cooperation. What is South-South cooperation? Is it a cooperation between the South countries? No, it is a cooperation among the developing countries. So this shows BRICS contingency reserve arrangement shows South-South cooperation. China is the highest contributor. So COVID-19, what is the role of IMF? Right? The trade was decreased during COVID-19. So trade became to standstill. There was no movement of ships and aircrafts. That was the crisis. Next, remittances fell. What do you mean by remittances falling? It means, so whoever Indians were outside, they stopped sending the money because they themselves had lost the jobs, and many people came from foreign countries to India. So remittances also stopped. So there was a proposal for increasing the SDR by creation. So what they did under IMF, many countries has to increase the SDR, so special drawing rights. So it is a currency, right? So all the countries across the world are under crisis. We will print more SDRs and give it to countries so that they will come over the COVID crisis, right? But USA opposed it. USA opposed. India also opposed. India said this SDR will be misused among the countries, right? So under this, why did they try to have more SDR? Because they wanted to give liquidity at a cheap rate. Give money supply at a cheap rate. That is why they wanted to print more money, right? Under print more SDR, right? Next, so this completes the chapter on IMF. One big chapter is done. Next you have World Bank. World Bank Group. So what is this World Bank Group? So this is also one of the Bretton Woods institution. So it was formed alongside the IMF, right? Both came together, both came into existence at the same time, right? What is the reason for setup? See, and during that time, post Second World War, the entire Western Europe had gone into crisis. There was lot of devastation. Western European countries didn't have any money. So they take the money from USA under Lend-Lease Agreement. Lend-Lease Agreement. This money was given back to USA as recent as 2006, right? So Lend-Lease Agreement. Okay. So this was the reason. Post World War, reconstruction. Every country is devastated. We want to reconstruct the countries, right? So it now that there is no World War, all the reconstruction is done. It is focusing on the poor people. Poor people now focuses on poor people, poverty in the developing countries. That is the sole goal of World Bank, right? So it is a group of 5 international institutions. It consists of 5 international institutions. We will discuss what are the institutions. So its headquarters is in Washington, World Bank headquarters, and it has 189 countries totally. Who is the president of World Bank? So this is just like how IMF chiefs come from Europe, World Bank chief always come from United States of America. So the president, so it is called IMF, it is called chief. Here it is called IMF MD. Here World Bank president. The terminology is president. Who is the president? It is David Malpass. David Malpass is the president of World Bank as of now, right? So there are, I told you there are 5 organizations. The first organization is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. This is the first organ. The next organ is International Development Association, IDA. The third organization is International Financial Corporation. That is the third organization. The fourth organization is Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agreement. Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agreement is the fourth organization. The fifth organization is International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, ICSID. This is the first organization. India is a member of first four organizations. India is not the member of ICSID. India is not a member of International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. Why? Because if we become member of this, there is lot of foreign direct investment into India. All these people, foreign investors, for some silly reasons, they will drag us to World Bank. That is why India has not signed the ICSID agreement. Right? So, this just like IMF, World Bank is also owned by the members. So, no country is the single owner of the IMF or the World Bank. Right? It is owned by the members. So, sorry, in order to become a member of IMF, World Bank, first you should become the member of IMF. Without becoming member of International Monetary Fund, you cannot become member of World Bank. Right? So, every country subscribe to a share capital. There it is quota. Here World Bank will have shares. So, those shares will be divided among the countries. So, those share capital individual countries will subscribe to. Right? So, as per how much share you are having, upon that your voting power will be decided. If you have more share, your voting will be more. USA has more shares, its voting power is more in the IMF. So, should join IMF first. So, in the World Bank. So, its voting power is more in the World Bank. So, this World Bank gives a report called as World Development Report. So, IMF gives what report? IMF World Global Economic Outlook, World Economic Outlook and Financial Stability Report. Financial Stability Report, right? So, this World Bank gives the World Development Report, right? This report is very, very important. Next, see World Bank, actually World Bank Group consists of 5 organizations, what I told. But what we refer just as World Bank, it is 2 organizations, IBRD and IDA. These 2 organizations constitute the World Bank, right? So, it is the largest development bank. Which is the largest development bank? It is IBRD, is the largest. The IBRD, also called as World Bank, is the largest development bank. I have already told you what is an investment bank, what is a merchant bank, right? And what is a development bank. It focuses on development of the country in various sectors, right? So, there are various financial products that the World Bank gives. That is, various investment it is going to give. Various investment it is going to do in the infrastructure sector, poverty sector, hunger, right? Education, all these sectors, World Bank is going to invest, right? So, it has multiple financial products. Not only that, it also, just like IMF, it is going to provide for policy advice. Policy advice to the countries is given by the World Bank. If there is any policy lacuna in your country, there is any policy shortfall, shortcoming, World Bank is going to give the policy prescription, right? So, IBRD finances only government and government projects, not private projects. IBRD, only government and government projects is funded by the IBRD. So, what are the areas it is going to focus into? As I said, it is going to focus on what? Poverty, infrastructure, hunger, health, right? Pension, all these things. Building schools, right? So, all these things is focused by the IBRD. So, they provide loans as well as grants. See, loans means, so that money you have to give back. Grants means you need not give back that money. This grant is given to poorest of the poor countries. Loans to other countries, right? So IBRD focuses on middle income and credit worthy poor countries. Middle income country, just like India is a middle income country, we will take money from IBRD. And also credit worthy poor countries, let it be a poor country, but it should be credit worthy. Means it should give back the money that is given to it. Right? These two IBRD is going to focus upon. Whereas IDA, International Development Association, it gives money at a concessional rate. That is very less interest rate, 0.1%, 0.5%. Right? At that interest, they are going to give money over a long period, 35 years, 40 years. It is as if you need not repay the money. Right? Like that, International Development Association gives the money. So, that money goes to the poorest of the poor countries. See, IBRD doesn't give to the poorest countries. It is the only credit-worthy poor countries they'll give. But even if a country is not a credit-worthy country, for that country also IDA will provide fund. It is a concessionally lending arm, lending at a very less rate. So IDA was started in 1960. Is the year International Development Association was formed. Right? So they provide long-term interest-free loan to 80 poorest countries. Long-term interest-free or low interest. So interest-free loan or to low interest loan to the 80 poorest countries in the world is provided by the International Development Association. So they not only loan, they also provide grant. Grant means free money. Then you need not pay the money to debt distressed countries. Those countries which have taken too much money, debt. So if they don't repay the money, Sala, then for them, if they are under some distress, they have taken money, they are not able to repay, they are under further crisis. So for those countries, the IMF is going to give grant. Not only that, it is going to give debt relief. Debt relief means if a country has taken money from the World Bank, what the World Bank does, if he is not able to, IDA, if that country is not able to pay the money to the IDA, they will do maafi that you need not pay the money. That is the debt relief given by the IDA. To whom they are going to give debt relief? Heavily indebted poor countries. And multilateral, so debt relief will be given under two initiatives. Just like, see, IMF has this GAB and NAB. Right? Similarly, World Bank has heavily indebted poor countries. For them, debt will be cleared. HIPC countries, and also there is Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative, MDRI. So there also debt will be given maafi under these two initiatives, HIPC and Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative. Multilateral means many countries. Debt relief, giving the relief to the debt. This is one initiative, and heavily indebted poor countries. Next you have IBRD. How does it raise the fund? Where does it see? IMF will raise the fund via quota. Where does the World Bank? There is, so fundraising is through financial market. Right? IMF for World Bank, you will not give any money to the World Bank. Right? There will be shares. You will subscribe to some shares. Right? But there is nothing called quota where you maintain the money. Right? So in that condition, World Bank is going to take the money from the market, gather the money from the market through the fundraising through the financial market will be done. Right? This is the concept. Next you have IDA, International Development Association. This is focusing on the poorest countries, as I told. How do they gather the money? So they will gather the money from the rich countries. Rich countries is going to give grant to the poor countries via IDA. Also IBRD, they will give some money, right? So that money will be repaid. That repaid or interest will also get added to IDA resource. Interest from the IBRD money. Right? So these two are the resources for IDA. One is the rich country grant. Next is profit made by IBRD loans. Right? Next you have who are the donors. So IDA donors are the richest countries. They meet every 3 years. Every 3 years they meet and they are going to see if in this IDA what will happen. They are going to exhaust the money by giving to poor countries. What they do? These donors will meet every 3 years and put money back into the IDA, replenish the money, right? So also not only they replenish the money, they are going to discuss the policies. What are the policy changes that are required? That will also be discussed. So where does the IDA invest in? See, it invests in building houses or providing food, providing vaccination, providing health care, right? Providing clothes. All these are the providing employment. All these are the sectors where International Development Association is going to work into, right? Next you have the which countries does the IDA is going to give loan to, right? So it is depending on the per capita income. If a countries, I told you IDA gives money to the poorest of the poor countries. How do you consider a country as poor? Based on the per capita income. If the country's per capita income is low, for them loan will be given or grant will be given under IDA. And also small islands economies. Small island economies. You take these countries in the Pacific, Western Pacific. You have many countries. This Fiji is there. Fiji, Tuvalu is there. Right? And many countries. When there are many names of the small island countries. Comoros, all these countries. Right? So for those countries, small island countries, IDA is going to give money because they are not credit worthy, means they don't have any capacity to repay the money. Even then, IDA is going to give money. So next you have the concept of blend countries. What do you mean by blend countries? So Nigeria and Pakistan are a good example of blend country. What is blend country means? See, I told you IBRD gives money to middle income and poor countries, credit worthy poor countries. IDA gives money to poorest countries. So Pakistan and Nigeria are such countries, they get qualified for both. They get qualified as poor, they get qualified as credit worthy poor. So under these two, they'll get the money. That is why it is called a blend country. Pakistan and Nigeria is the example. Okay. Next, you have international financial cooperation. IBRD and IDA is done. Let's look at international financial cooperation. Whenever you look at IFC, you should remember that it is speaking of investment in the private sector, private companies. So this is the private lending arm of the World Bank. Private lending is done by the World Bank. It is done by the International Financial Corporation. It promotes private sector investment in developing countries. It is going to give money to the private sector, and in turn private sector is going to invest money in the economy, right? This is the concept, right? Why should the money should be given to private sector? See, when you give money to private sector, there are a lot of positive spin-offs. They are going to invest money. They are going to increase the employment, and they under CSR, corporate social responsibility, they are going to invest in social sector also. So all are the benefits of the investment in private sector, right? So that is why private sector investment is very, very important in developing countries. So this investment will reduce poverty because more and more employment is generated. That is one thing. And also increase the quality of life, because this private sector will employ the people and they will give living wage. There is a concept of minimum wage basic wage and living wage. Living wage, minimum wage is that wage which satisfy the food, shelter and clothing, basic minimum, right? Living wage is the concept of where not only food, shelter, clothing plus education, health and all those facilities. There is a decent standard of living. So basic wage will be something in between the minimum wage and living wage, right? So next you have, so this is the largest multilateral source of loan for private economy, private companies. If private companies want to take money, this is the largest multilateral source in the world, right? So where do this IFC get its money from? See, the first is its own resources. It will have its own resources, and also it takes money from the international financial market. It is going to issue bonds and take the money from the financial market. So these are the two sources. So India has the highest exposure to IFC. So Indian companies have taken the lot of money from the IFC, right? Next you have, where do the money goes to? What areas? The area is, one is inclusive growth. I have told you what is inclusive growth. Next, the money goes to financial inclusion. Financial inclusion means not everybody knows how to operate a financial account, including the poor into financial account, lower caste into financial account, physically disabled to financial account, old age people into financial account, women into financial account. All these leads to financial inclusion. Then it focuses on providing microcredit. Microcredit means small credit, right? That also it focuses on. And also it focuses on renewable energy. Funding the renewable energy, solar panels, all those things, right? Next, it also focuses on funding the private-public partnership. I have discussed in detail public-private partnership. IMF is going to fund it, right? I mean, IFC is going to fund it under the World Bank. Next, you have Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. So, just by the name, it shows that it is a insurance. It acts like a insurance. So, what is the concept of insurance? Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. See, this foreign direct investment comes into countries, right? So, in this foreign direct investment, what happens? They will be hesitant to invest in developing countries because they don't know whether they can take the money back by investing. So then what will be done? This industry, MIGA, M-I-G-A, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, is going to give insurance. It is going to give insurance to these investors, foreign investors, that you invest the money. If something goes wrong, we will provide the money to you. Investor insurance, right? By insuring the investors. This is the concept of MIGA, right? So next, you have International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. I told you India is not a member. So what does it do? Conciliation and arbitration among the countries and investors, individual investors. See, there is some individual investor in India. He takes up some fight with the government. That, for example, you can take the case of Vodafone. So government imposed retrospective taxation. I told you what is retrospective taxation. So Vodafone deal happened in 2007-8. So India, in the financial bill 2012, they put retrospective taxation from a back date. So the tax law will come today, but it will be enforced from back date. So 2022 new tax law will be enacted, but you should pay this tax from 2015. That is retrospective taxation. Under these conditions, This is called as, this is sometimes called as discriminatory, under which what happens, investors will take the case to international arbitration. So ICSID acts as a international arbitration center. They are going to hear the fight between the countries and the investors, right? Okay, this is all about ICSID. Next, India and World Bank. What is the relationship? So India has taken loan from funds from World Bank. Lot of funds they have got from the World Bank, right? And also not only funds, they have taken advice also. When there is financial crisis, when there is any issues, policy prescriptions are given by the World Bank, right? So they give money at a very low cost to India, right? And they will give stable and stable money. So the money that they give maintains stability in our country, economic stability. So to maintain the economic stability, World Bank resources are important, also important because they are low cost, and the money is given for long term, 20 years, 30 years. That is why it is important. So India is taking money both under IBRD and IDA. IDA money is very, very attractive to India, International Development Association. Why? It is at very low interest rate or interest free rate for very long term. Right? India is a beneficiary under IDA. Where are the areas? I have been telling it again and again. Infrastructure, health, hunger, poverty, everywhere the World Bank has invested in India. Right? You take river projects, you take even Swachh Bharat initiative, they have provided support. Right? Manrega, they have provided support. National Food Security Act, they have provided support. And vaccination, they have provided support. Ayushman Bharat, they have provided support. So all these areas, World Bank, even your PDS is also supported. So all these areas are supported. Till now, World Bank has given $100 billion loans to India. Right? This is the number. States, see, can the states borrow from the World Bank directly? Individual states, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, can they go directly and buy from, take loan from the World Bank? So as per constitution, individual states cannot borrow from the international organizations. Right? That is why there was a flood in Kerala 2-3 years back. Flood had happened. This Dubai, UAE tried to give money to the Kerala directly, whereas it was stopped by the central government, saying that you cannot give to specific state. You have to give to the country as a whole. Likewise, individual states cannot go and borrow from the World Bank. They have to go through the central government. Right? So this is the concept. IMF and World Bank, what are the differences? What are the difference between IMF and World Bank? See, IMF is a single institution. World Bank is a group of 5 institutions. Next, IMF focuses on monetary policy, money policy. If there is many monetary instability, if there is any currency volatility, that is where IMF is going to focus on. Whereas World Bank is going to focus on the poor countries. Right? Then IMF focuses on exchange rate stability, maintaining the proper exchange rate which is not volatile, whereas World Bank focuses on it works as a development institution, developing various sectors, various countries. Right? Then IMF focuses on BOP, bailout, balance of payment. If there is a crisis, IMF bails out, whereas here there is no private sector lending in IMF. Here we have private lending under IFC, International Financial Corporation, which is a part of World Bank. Then IMF focuses on short-term lending, whereas World Bank focuses on long-term lending. That is the difference. Then resources, I told you, IMF gets the resources via quota money, whereas this World Bank gets the money from the market by giving the bond, and they are going to take money from the market. Not only from that, they are going to take money from the grants given by the rich countries in IDA, right? That is the difference. So there are additional institutions. See, this World Bank has additional institutions of MIGA and ICSID, whereas there are no such institutions under IMF, right? This is the concept. See, what are the similarities? They will hold joint annual meetings every year. Then their ownership is by the governments. Both are headquartered in USA. That is also there. And their goal is also similar, to uplift the countries, to uplift the poor countries is the goal. So this is the similarities between World Bank and IMF. Next, we are now focusing on Bretton Woods 2.0. What is Bretton Woods? I told you, World Bank and IMF were formed under the Bretton Woods institution in the Bretton Woods Conference 1944-45. So now we are focusing on Bretton Woods 2.0. Why there is a need for Bretton Woods 2.0? Because there is a refocus post 2008. See, World Bank and IMF together was not able to prevent the 2008 crisis. That is why we should focus more on different sectors, focus more on different countries, right? That is the refocus post 2008. That is one thing. Then these institutions, World Bank and IMF, are in the control of the Western countries. So these control should be diluted and there should be democratization among the countries. Democratization means what? Every country should have equal say in the working of the IMF and World Bank. That is one reform. Then there should be merit-based appointment. Just because you are a European or a USA national, you cannot be appointed a head of the IMF or World Bank. There should be merit-based, not country-based appointment. These are the some reforms. Then IMF should act as a lender of last resort. Who is the lender of last resort in India? It is the RBI. Similarly, IMF should act as a lender of last resort in the world arena. Next, SDRs. This SDR, special drawing rights, can be treated as a world reserve currency, central currency. That could also be reformed under Bretton Woods 2.0. Then World Bank should focus on sustainable development goals. I told you the 17 goals. So World Bank should focus on that. Then there should be focus on global trade. We should stop the trade wars. We should stop trade wars, currency wars, all those things, and trade should be beneficial for all the countries. Towards that goal, the IMF and World Bank should work. Then we should focus on environment and climate change, right? That is also a goal of, that should also be the goal of World Bank and IMF under Bretton Woods 2.0. So World Bank, what is the response during COVID? Right? COVID, you know, it brought down the entire economy. So what was the response of World Bank? So World Bank started giving concessional money to all the countries, right? They also gave policy prescriptions. So what is the role in the World Bank in the COVID in India? They give $2 billion. First they gave $1 billion, then they gave another $1 billion. They have also invested in the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. What the Prime Minister started, they have invested in it. This is all about the World Bank Group. This completes the chapter on World Bank. Next we will move towards the biggest chapter, World Trade Organization. Very, very important. Right? So, what is World Trade Organization? When did it begin? What is the role of this organization? Right? So, this organization started functioning in 1947. Right? So first it's, see today what is the role? World trade. It focuses on the trade among the countries. It sees whether the trade is beneficial for all. So that is the work of the World Trade Organization, right? Okay. So it started as a general agreement on trade and tariffs in 1947, right? So started by 23 countries. 23 countries start this GATT in 1947, right? So then it is with respect to goods, not services, right? So only goods they start. And what is the goal of this GATT? To establish free and fair international trading among the countries. The trade should be free. Free means what? There should be not any restrictions. What will be the restrictions? You have tax restrictions, I have told you. Tariff restrictions. Not only tariff restrictions, there will be non-tariff restrictions as well. Non-tariff restrictions, I have told you, giving the example of mango. The mango should be only this much size, this taste, only this color, right? That is a non-tariff restriction. Also imposing that it should be grown in this soil only. All these are the non-tariff restrictions. Tax and non-tariff restrictions, that should not be there. Trade should be free and it should be fair. Fair means there should be no discrimination among the countries. It should be free and fair. No discrimination among the countries in trading, right? So trading, to establish such kind of a trading regime is the goal of GATT in 1947. So they aim at liberalizing the global trade. Liberalizing means what? At that time there were lot of conditions, lot of drawbacks, lot of hindrances. There was no trade taking place between, especially during the Cold War, there was no trade between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. Berlin itself was divided by Berlin Wall, right? There was no trade between liberal countries and communist countries. India itself was a self-imposed economy, self-sufficient or self-reliant economy. India followed the policy of import substitution, right? So because of this, liberalizing the global trade and also remove tariff and non-tariff restrictions. I have told you what is tariff. Tariff means tax, non-tariff means other restrictions, government restrictions, political restrictions, economic restrictions, right? So to remove these two, this is the goal of GATT. So India was a member among the 23 members who started the GATT. India was one of the member, right? Okay. So areas. So as the GATT grew through multiple rounds of, what is a round? Round is a extended period of time where they will take up certain issues. They will pick up some issue. For example, tax issue. They will pick up the tax issue and they are going to discuss that issue over 2-3 years. And they are going to come at an agreement. This entire cycle is called as one round. There are multiple rounds. The first round is Havana round. Havana round is there. Then Geneva round is there. Then Dillon round is there. Then Kennedy round is there. Right? Then you have Uruguay round. Now is the what? Doha round. These are the rounds of discussion under World Trade Organization. Clear with the concept of rounds? Okay. So under these rounds, then areas, the number of areas where the IMF works, that have been increased. Earlier they were focusing on not only the areas, the depth is also increased. Means what? Earlier they were focusing on only one good, few goods, then number of goods increased. Earlier they were focusing on some countries, now number of countries increased. Earlier they were focusing on just goods, now they are focusing on services and also intellectual property rights. Earlier only few sectors where they are focusing, now renewable energy and artificial intelligence, that also they are focusing. So the areas are increasing. Not only the areas, the depth is also increasing. Means depth means they are very well versed with the trade. Whatever the trade, World Trade Organization is the body. So there are multiple trade rounds. I told you the headquarters of World Trade Organization is in Geneva, right? Geneva, Switzerland, right? Now, when did the World Trade Organization get formed? It was formed in 1995. At the end of Uruguay round. At the end of Uruguay round, 1986, between 1986 to 1994, the round was for 8 years. At the end of this round, the World Trade Organization was formed. What was GATT? In 1947, got changed into World Trade Organization in 1995. Clear? Okay. So this changes across the world. So why did Uruguay round only? Why not under earlier round the World Trade Organization was not formed? Why only under Uruguay round? Right? During that time there was lot of changes in the world. What were the changes in the world? I will tell you some changes. One is 1991, USSR collapsed. Right? That is one change. Then communist countries were falling. Communist countries were falling. There was more acceptance towards liberal and market economy. Right? Then there was 1991 crisis in India, BOP crisis. Right? So all these are the conditions, all these are the reasons responsible for the World Trade Organization forming in 1995, changing from GATT. Right? So now new area. See, this World Trade Organization, when it was proposed to be formed in 1995, there was lot of opposition. So not then, but later on also there is lot of opposition. From whom? From the developing countries. Right? So now there are new areas of IPR. IPR is included. What is IPR? Intellectual property rights. What do you mean by that? You research and find a vaccine. Somebody steals the idea and they manufacture the vaccine. So that is breach of intellectual property right. So if you manufacture a vaccine, if you get a license for that, that is intellectual property right. Okay. So IPR is included, agriculture is included, now services is included, foreign direct investment is also included under the World Trade Organization. Right. So we have developing countries. See, these developing countries, they were opposing. See, why were they opposing? Because earlier they focused on what? Very few areas, and they wanted to limit the trade or the discussion only to these few areas. Let's say trade in some goods, consumer goods or something like that. But these developed countries, USA and European countries, what they wanted to include more areas into the discussion. So developing countries opposed. Why? Because if more areas are included, there will be lot of restrictions on the developing countries. See, if they include IPR, India is the biggest breacher of IPR. India is said to be a copycat. They just copy from the Western. There is a derogatory, but that is not true. Right? But true to some extent, especially with respect to generic medicine and all. So, IPR issue, if it is bought under World Trade Organization, it will be problematic for India. And agriculture issue, we are the highest giver of subsidy, MSP. If it is bought under the World Trade Organization, it will be problematic for India. Services, India is the biggest beneficiary of services, service industry. If it is bought under the IPR, I mean World Trade Organization, it will be problematic. FDA also, India is the highest, one of the highest receiver, it will be problematic. So developing countries including India opposed opening up. They did not want to open up their economies or one is open up the trade discussions to these areas. That is one thing. Also, they did not want to open up their economies to free flow of foreign trade. Why? If there is free flow of foreign trade, it will be loss of customs duty to the countries. So, but what happened? Developed countries, USA, European countries, they forced these countries, developing countries, into budge, to fall in terms, to fall in line. So India had to agree. So what they do, they prepare when the developing countries pressurize, they will agree, and a draft will be formed. Before World Trade Organization, there is a draft. Draft means proper one rough agreement, rough paper. That paper is called Dunkel draft. Dunkel draft is the first draft under World Trade Organization at the end of Uruguay Road. After Dunkel draft, they are going to form a treaty in 1994, very, very important, Marrakesh Treaty. Marrakesh Treaty, they are going to sign it in 1994, because of which 1995 World Trade Organization comes into picture. Right? So, today World Trade Organization has 164 members. Right? So, what is the difference between GATT and World Trade Organization? See, GATT is an agreement. World Trade Organization is a proper organization. GATT had few members. This had many members. GATT had only few areas to talk about. World Trade Organization has many areas to talk about. GATT focused only on goods. World Trade Organization focuses on goods, services and IPRs under TRIPS. So all these are the differences between GATT and World Trade Organization. So if you want to be a part of World Trade Organization, right, you need not be a sovereign country. Means what? You need not be a proper independent country. You can just be a customs territory. Custom territory means what? So, European Union is a customs territory. Means they will remove the customs duty among themselves. So, you have France, you have Germany, you have Italy, all these countries, there is no customs duty if the goods go from one country to another country. But if goods go from India to any of these countries, there is customs duty. That is the meaning of customs union. Clear? So, these countries, they need not be sovereign countries, just being a custom territory with autonomy for external relations, that is external trade. That is, you can sign external trade agreements with any country, right? For external trade, if you have autonomy, then you are eligible to become a member of World Trade Organization, right? This is the concept, just custom territory with autonomy for external relations, right? This is the concept. That is, your external relations you should be free to do. You need not be taking any permission. So that is why you have Hong Kong and Taiwan, who are not countries. They are considered to be part of China, but they are part of World Trade Organization because they are a customs union, plus external relations they are free to do. External relations not with respect to polity, but with respect to trade, right? So there is a Director General. Who is the Director General of World Trade Organization now? Is it Roberto Azevedo? I will just check. Who is the Director General of World Trade Organization? It is some woman, African woman, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. So the name is not important. It is anyhow difficult to remember, right? Ngozi some Iweala. Okay. So you can just remember the first name, Ngozi Iweala. Right? So earlier it was Robert Azevedo. It was easy to remember. So the term of the DG is 4 years. Right? Okay, so this World Trade Organization, it is not a member of the United Nations. It doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of, see, whereas IMF and World Bank, they are the specialized bodies of the United Nations, whereas this is not a member of UN, right? But there is an agreement exists between UN and World Trade Organization. What is the agreement? They are going to exchange data among themselves. They are going to have representation at each other's meeting. UN will come to World Trade Organization meeting. World Trade Organization is going to go for UN meeting, right? This kind of relationship they have with respect to agreement. So, with respect to World Trade Organization, see, IMF and World Bank, how much money you give, you will have that much voting power. But with respect to World Trade Organization, every country will have one vote. It is not dependent on the money, right? So, there is a decision by consensus. There is no majority vote or something like that. So, the decision is carried out by consensus. Everybody agreeing, right? So, these decisions are either carried out in green room decisions. So, why green room decisions? Because World Trade Organization DG, Director General Room, it is painted in green color. So, green room decisions, or they will carry out the decisions in mini ministerials. We will discuss what is mini ministerials. So, ministers coming together is called mini ministerials, but few ministers are going to come and talk, that is mini ministerial. So, even in the green room, some World Trade members are going to go there and discuss, right? This is the concept. Decision making in World Trade Organization, how the decision is being made. So, one, you have ministerial conference. This happens once in 2 years. So, in this ministerial conference, commerce minister of every country will participate. This is the highest decision making body or the first level body under the World Trade Organization, ministerial conference, right? So, 2001, fourth ministerial in Doha happened. So, since after this Doha, after this Uruguay round, 1995 Marrakesh Treaty, World Trade Organization formed, then there were many ministerials, Singapore ministerial, right, Doha ministerial, and you have Geneva ministerial, right, Bali ministerial, in the countries which has happened, right. So, 2001, fourth ministerial happened in Doha, it gave rise to Doha development round. So, just like all the rounds I discussed, which is the present round that is happening in World Trade Organization means it is Doha development round is the present round. So, 2003, so under this ministerial conference, two changes are important. 2003, trade facilitation was accepted. What do you mean by trade facilitation? Every country allowing, facilitating trade by other country. India allowing trade for Germany to happen in India. Germany to carry out trade in India, or Germany facilitating India to trade in its country is the concept of trade facilitation. So, trade facilitation was accepted in 2016. Trade facilitation agreement was signed in 2003 was the trade facilitation was accepted. Trade facilitation agreement, when was it signed? Yeah, I think it is in 2016. Let me check. Yeah, it entered into force in 2017. Trade facilitation agreement of World Trade Organization. So, it was signed, entered into force in 2017. Trade facilitation agreement. It was agreed in 2003, right? General Council. So, second level body is General Council. This, whatever the decision taken by the ministerial conference, it is implemented by the General Council, right? So, this General Council is also in Geneva, right? This General Council, here it is Commerce Minister, here ambassadors will go. Ambassadors of the countries will be representing in the General Council. See, this General Council will act as a dispute settlement body. It also acts as a trade policy review body. It acts like two bodies, right? One body is dispute settlement body. The second body is trade policy review body. This General Council itself will meet as dispute settlement. Means what? If there is dispute between two countries with respect to trade, they will go to this body. Who is going to be there in dispute settlement body? It is the members of General Council, who generally the ambassadors of countries. Next, there will also be a trade policy review body. What does this body do? They are going to review the trade policy among the countries. Clear? Okay. There is a third level of body. The third level of body is Council for. There is a third level. There is councils. Many councils are there. Councils. First you have councils for trade in goods, councils for trade in services, and council for trade in trips, intellectual property rights. So this is the third level body. First level ministerial, second level general, third is the council for trade in goods, services and trips, right? So not only this, you have some special bodies as well. Those bodies are not the special body with respect to agriculture, industry, many bodies are there. Logistics. So those are not very important. Next you have dispute settlement. How the dispute settlement, if there is a dispute, how it will be settled. See, there are, let's say, country A and country B, right? Country B has violated WTO rules. That is, country should not impose excessive tax. That is one of the rule. So country B has violated the WTO rule. What does this country do? A will go to World Trade Organization. First stage, they will go to World Trade Organization. What the World Trade Organization will do? It is going to arrange for bilateral consultation. It is going to ask these two countries, please talk among yourself if there is any dispute. So there is an arrangement made for bilateral consultations, and it goes on for 60 days. Up to 60 days. Right? So then you have, it goes up to 60 days. If you do not come at a conclusion by the end of 60 days, there is no conclusion. Right? So then there is a second stage. What is the second stage? There is a adjudication by panel. There will be a proper panel. See, here comes the role of DSB, Dispute Settlement Body, which is in turn, it is nothing but the General Council. General Council itself meets as a dispute settlement body. There will be a panel. The panel is going to look into the issue and they are going to give a ruling. So that ruling, the countries has to follow. So they are going to, this B has to follow that ruling. That ruling might be reduce the tax rate which you have increased. Suppose B does not do it. What? There is a provision for here itself, the A will be allowed to conduct retaliatory measures. So retaliatory measures means B has increased tax on your products. What WTO allows you A also to increase the taxes. You also increase tit for tat. Right? That is done under second stage. The third stage is, see, if that happens, B has one more option. B has option for appellate body. Appellate body is the third stage. Third stage among the in the dispute settlement. There is an appellate body of 7 members. We will discuss because there is an issue with respect to appellate body. Very important. So appellate body 7 members, they will meet. So they are going to give binding rule. That is, whatever the decision, whatever the order the appellate body gives, that is binding. binding on all the members, right? So that is with respect to appellate body, they have to follow it, right? So B will be given binding ruling. If B doesn't follow, here also A will be allowed to carry out retaliatory measures. They can also increase the taxes, right? So then they will give the ruling. What is the ruling? Make changes. B should make changes. If changes are not made within a specific time, they will allow cross retaliatory measures, retaliate against the country. This is the concept. So why does this, what does this ensure? It ensures level playing field. That is, no country is above, no country is below. All are equal. Level playing field is ensured, right? But there are lot of shortcomings of this dispute settlement. What is the shortcoming? See, apart from retaliatory measures, there is no punishment. Punishment being given to the members who violate the rule, right? That is one of the drawbacks. Not only that, poor countries, they cannot retaliate, right? If USA imposes high tax on poor countries' products, how can poor country retaliate against the USA? It is not possible, right? So this is also a drawback of dispute settlement. So we have this concept of appellate body crisis. There is a crisis. See, there are 7 members. There should be at least 3 members to form a bench. So there are only 3 members in the, only 3 judges in the appellate body. So 3 judges are minimum required in order to give a ruling. To form a minimum bench. However, these 3 judges were also set to retire. When they retire, there will be 0 judges. So 0 judges, the entire appellate body mechanism in the World Trade Organization will vanish. Right? What is the hindrance in appointing the new judges? Actually, USA is the hindrance. USA holds how much? USA holds approximately 16% vote in the World Trade Organization. So, for any decision to be made, there is requirement of 85% voting. Since 16% is with USA, USA has a veto. Why USA is opposing it? They say, USA, why it is opposing means, USA says World Trade Organization is working against the USA interest. They are not promoting the USA interest. Right? That is why USA has withheld the appointment of the judges. Right? So if there is, the entire appellate body vanishes, what will happen? The countries will be left to deal among themselves. So instead of going to this dispute settlement, they will fight among themselves. So the entire trade, entire level playing field, entire concept of fair trade will vanish. Right? This is the concept. So this is a appellate body, is a standing body of 7 members. Its ruling is binding, and only 3 judges are there. Consensus appointment is being done. So USA has vetoed it. So next you have the concept of foundational principles of World Trade Organization. What are the foundational principles? We'll do this and end today's class. So first you have the concept of national treatment. What do you mean by national treatment? See, there is these 3 are the foundational principles of World Trade Organization. Means what? National treatment means, see, here is India. Right? Here you have some country. Right? So, if this country is exporting, let's say, biscuits to India, here Hyderabad is also, Hyderabad or Odisha is also manufacturing biscuit, the same biscuit. Right? So, the biscuit which is coming from this country and the biscuit which is manufactured within the country, both of them should be treated equal. There should be no discrimination. That is, foreign products should also be treated like a national product. product manufacturing. There should be no extra tax. There should be no non-tariff barriers. That is the concept of national treatment under World Trade Organization. Then you have the most favored nation concept. So what is most favored nation? Means if you become a member of World Trade Organization, every country should give to any other country this status of most favored nation. Why? Because it will lead to what? Easy trade. That means what? Every country is favored for making the trade. There is no trade barrier. This is the concept of most favored nation. It follows the principle of easy trade. We will discuss that. Then you have special and differential treatment. This is with respect to developing countries. Developing countries, right? We will discuss what are these. National treatment is done. We will discuss MFN. What is MFN? So MFN means if the trading relations between two countries, country A and country B, if the trading relation is normal between these two countries, it is called most favored nation. That is the first concept, normal trading relation among the countries. The second concept is if country A gives concession to country C, it should give the same concession to all the countries across the world. All the members of the World Trade Organization should be given the same concession. That is the concept of most favored nation. It signifies a normal trading relation and giving concession to all the countries together. These two conditions, right? Every country is statutorily obliged to grant MFN. Statutorily means what? By law. By the World Trade Organization statute, Marrakesh Treaty, every country should give every country the most favored nation status, right? Next you have, it signifies non-discrimination. So three factors. One is, means what? You should not discriminate among the countries. If three countries are there, B should treat C and A equally. There should be no discrimination, right? Three concepts: normal trading relation, non-discrimination, and giving favor. If one country is favored, all the countries should be favored. This is the concept of most favored nation. It is such an important concept under World Trade Organization. It was the first article of GATT. First article of GATT was this most favored nation concept, right? So exceptions to most favored nation. What are the exceptions? One is regional trade blocks. So regional trade blocks like SAARC, BIMSTEC, right? RCEP, NAFTA, Mercosur. All these are what? Regional trading blocks. They trade among themselves. Even ASEAN is a regional trading bloc. So this regional trading bloc focuses on what? Regional integration. There can be exception to the World Trade or MFN. That is in the regional. In the SAARC has how many countries? 8 countries. So 8 countries can reduce the tariff among themselves. Right? Among themselves they can reduce the tariff. But they need not reduce it with other countries, external countries outside SAARC. That is the concept of regional trading blocks are exempted from MFN, most favored nation. Next you have imports from poor countries at zero tariff. If, see, for poor countries you can give exception. Poor countries the tariff might be zero, but that not be the case with all the countries. So these poor countries giving the exception is called Generalized System of Preferences, GSP, right? Next you have India and Pakistan. There is a India and Pakistan exception. Means what? Because there is political volatility, political fight between our countries. What can happen? We can get into a special arrangement for trading before establishing full trade. Before establishing normal trade relations among India and Pakistan, we can have a temporary special arrangement among ourselves. right? This is the concept of exception, India-Pakistan exception to most favored nation, right? So, these are the three exceptions to most favored nation, right? So, India had provided MFN to Pakistan, Pakistan had not provided it to us. So, after Pulwama attack in 2019, India also revoked the MFN to Pakistan. Also, what did India do? India increased the taxation by 200% on the Pakistani products, right? So, next tomorrow we will discuss the concept of solar panels and other things, right? Okay. So, if you have any doubts, please put it in the comment section, or you can reach us through our VHS Education Forum Telegram channel. Also, if you have any suggestions about the classes, quality of classes, any changes you need, please do let us know. Not only that, if you have any doubts, you can contact us, but we urge you to make good use of the classes, both veteran aspirants and fresher aspirants, right? And we will meet again tomorrow. Please take good care of your health. Jai Hind. Namaste.